Hey, welcome to Tennis 2020 Real Talk, Real People, Real Life. We're here today, speaking with, and we do this stuff live, so for some reason the music came back, and I'm not sure exactly what, and it's playing back our own show. Let's see if we can.
Is there no delay?
Good, bring me back on, Kim. Well, let's see what happens as we do this. Maybe we won't play music this time. That
All right.
um, we're here talking with Robert Castillo, who is a mental performance consultant, and
Yes.
it looks like we are looping back again.
No, it's like it's.
Welcome to the fun of live.
Yeah. This is
So,
part of it,
hold,
right?
yeah,
How do you have
yeah.
mental agility, right? How do
There you
you
go.
shift? So
Hold on
yeah,
one
yeah,
second. Let's see if I can help
yeah,
figure
yeah.
this out.
Okay.
It's continuing to loop.
All right. Let's see what we get. We have no idea what is going on here. What we have that is looping and delaying. Let's see. Settings.
It's just continuing to loop. Can we end and come back? If that live stream just join the loop. Like on this one, just say we're gonna end and come back. You wanna try it one more time? It just keep looping.
Well, don't stop that one.
It didn't.
Okay, so just stop that one. You keep an eye there to make sure that. Wow, more fun. I don't know. We haven't changed anything, so we very well may be stuck in the same world that we were in. We'll see if my voice
Okay.
comes back. But we're going to try this. And,
Right.
oh, no, there we are.
It's back again.
Hmm. But we're not hearing it twice. What are you hearing on your end?
I just hear you. That's all I hear.
You hear me, but you're not hearing me twice.
Yeah. No, just once. Yeah. I'm hearing you loud and clear, perfectly. No reverb. No, I don't hear anything.
The challenges, the challenges, the challenges.
Now I can
Can
hear. I can hear.
I'm guessing that we're both going to hear
Yeah,
each other
I can hear
again.
you
And
now.
yeah,
I hear you just fine. No, no reverb, no but double. Just I hear you fine, loud and clear.
You know what's happening, Joey? We're hearing the
it's-
playback back through.
hmm. Okay. What can I do to? The issue is I hear myself again, so there's some sort of delay happening, and we'll figure it out. I think, or not figure it out and just run
Yeah.
with it.
Either way, I'm ready to go.
All right, I'm going to just try to listen to you and ignore myself. That other people ignore me all the time, so I get to see if I can have that same affliction.
There you go.
So tell me about what it is that you do.
Yeah. If you think of sport and performance psychology, there's two ends of the spectrum in psychology, right? When we think of psychology, we think of disorders, right? You think of, that's one end of the spectrum, clinical, depression, anxiety, and those kinds of things. And that's not my world. My world is more on this other end of the spectrum where we're talking about well-adjusted individuals and applying psychological principles to helping people achieve their goals, right? So what gets in the way of people achieving their goals are things like confidence, things like managing stress, the ability to stay focused on tasks. So I help individuals reach their full potential. And, I guess a simple way of saying it is I help people get out of their own way. A lot of times we know what we need to do from a performance perspective, but we are getting in our own ways, in terms of the way we're approaching the event, in terms of how we're talking to ourselves. So I'm trying to help people get out of their way so they can take all this practice they've done and apply it on the fields or the courts or wherever else they're performing. So that's kind of a quick way of describing what I'm trying to do and how to help people.
We're so in this time when people are afflicted with emotions, right? My daughter called today and was worried about the fact that her mom is in Virginia and
Yeah,
she may not get to see her if Texas shuts down and traffic
yeah,
isn't allowed to move and things like that. She might not be able to get to Virginia. Um,
yeah.
what types of things can someone do to manage their emotions in a situation like this?
Yeah, so I think this is an interesting time for obviously for everybody, from athletes to parents to kids to corporations, right? There's a lot of unknowns. Um, so the term that I use is it's we live in a VUCA world, right? So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think that this defines or describes what we're going through. So it's how do you get through a VUCA world, right? And we tend to live in a VUCA world regardless, but now you add a pandemic on top of that, and it throws everything into chaos. So one of the things that I've been working on with clients is how to control what I call catastrophizing or catastrophic thinking, right? So that's where we make a mountain out of a molehill, or in this case, we're making a Himalaya out of a mountain. So this is a real thing. This is real serious consequences, right? And however, in our minds, we can make it much worse than it actually is for our own little worlds, right? And so for folks that are quarantined by themselves, and trying to stay safe, right, and they're in good health, we don't want to let these thoughts run away from ourselves, and we want to try to have some control in what we're thinking. So easy to say, harder to do, right? Because the emotions are so powerful, right? And this is so scary for some of us. It's really focusing on trying to get into a more realistic, most likely world that we're living in, right? So the most likely is that she may not get to see her mom in the immediate, right? So that's a realistic possibility. It's a bad, outcome. It's not what we want, but that might be something that may happen. So then, if we just get stuck in the emotions of like, I'm not going to be able to see her, I'm not going to be able to see her, this is so bad, we are just building up that level of emotion. So we want to jolt ourselves out of that, right? And to get to a place where, okay, if this is what's going to happen, what can I do about it? Where can I take some control? So that could be, I'm going to use Zoom, I'm going to use FaceTime, I'm going to, instead of one call a day, maybe it's 3 calls a day, right? And trying to find ways, you can't change it, but you can definitely do something to manage it, right? So it's being more realistic. In my world of psychology, we get a lot of individuals that say, "Oh, just think positive, right? Don't worry
Mm-hmm.
about it. Everything will be okay." I'm not about. I don't. I'm not indifferent. I don't dislike positivity. I don't want negativity. I want accuracy. I want us to think about the world as accurately as possible. Because when we're accurate,
Mm-hmm.
we can make clearer decisions, right, and make clearer choices, make more informed decisions, right. It's when we let inaccuracies get in our way, right. So I don't want us to be on one end of the spectrum and think like, oh, everything's going to be fine, and I don't want us to be on the other end of the spectrum thinking it's the worst thing ever, and we're never going to get through this, right? At some point, things will get back to some semblance of normal. Um, the world might look different, right, in terms of how we communicate, how we behave, but we're going to get back to what we maybe get closer to that normal. In that meantime, how do we control our emotions and manage our emotions so we can be more productive and effective? So I know that was a long-winded answer, and I don't know if that gave you something
No, you
to
did. You
hone in
gave
on.
me.
But yeah, yeah.
So is it to a degree a false expectation coming from that person and believing that the worst is going to happen as opposed to believing the best?
So yeah, I didn't define catastrophizing as effectively, and this gives me a chance, right? So there's a difference between contingency planning, right, which is productive, right? That's where we maybe anticipate something uh, bad that's going to happen, and we prepare for it. That's helpful. That's productive. It's going to keep moving that ball forward. Catastrophic thinking and catastrophizing is unproductive, right? It's where we're not taking any purposeful action. So we are continuing to just get stuck in the weeds, right? And there's 3 types of catastrophizing that we can think of. You have downward spiral, right? Which is, let's talk about the COVID-19 as, I'm not going to get to see my mom, right? If I don't get to see her, then I can't help her, right? If I can't help her, she may go outside and she might get sick, right? And we start building this story, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And at the end of it, we are just in this quicksand where we can't do anything and we can't move. We're paralyzed by that emotional response. That downward spiral, right, makes sense from first thought to the second thought and continuing down that line. That's one type of catastrophizing. Another type of catastrophizing is scattershot. That's where it's a lot of different thoughts. They're all not necessarily the most helpful or productive, but they are not necessarily related. They're not building upon each other. And then the last one is circling, right, where we just get stuck like in a broken record player, and we, um, you know, uh, just have that same thought over and over. And so,
It's
again, if
probably the
it's
one
an
that
accurate,
That's probably the one
yeah,
that
go
we
ahead.
talk about the most, right? So we talk
Yeah, yeah,
about it in lots of different ways, circling down the drain, a broken
yeah,
record,
yeah,
skipping that.
exactly. And so the when we get into that, that's unproductive, right? So you ask, like, is it, should we not necessarily think that this worst case thing can happen? If that's the reality, then we need to be accurate, right? Like, that's one of the challenges is we don't want to scare ourselves, but we also want to be informed. So there's that fine line between, let me learn what's going on so I have this information. Let me take some necessary steps to to protect myself and my family and my livelihood, or my season, right? If I'm an athlete, how do I get myself continue to improve even though I can't go out to the courts and play all the time, right? How do I actually continue to get better? versus I am going to hunker down in my closet and not go anywhere, right? And I'm not going to move. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Um, that is less productive, right? So we want to be realistic, and that again, that's challenging because the emotional response is so strong.
How can we affect the story that we tell ourselves so we are telling ourselves a more accurate story? Are there exercises that we can do? Because I guess I believe I can't not think about something, right? I can't not think about the orange elephant behind me. I have to now
Yes.
focus on something else, the purple dinosaur in the other corner.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the
Right.
more I try to not think about the orange elephant, the
You're
more I'm
absolutely
actually
right.
thinking
Yeah.
about the orange elephant, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that is knowing what some good targets are for you, right? So knowing your support system, knowing where is a if you're trying to seek information, knowing reliable sources, right? Let's not listen to just Timmy down the street giving us some information. Let's know where our reliable sources are so we can go get accurate information. That's one thing, right? So focus on the things that are going to be helpful, but focus on social support, right? Like who can I call that can help me, maybe view it from a different perspective, right? So know who my resources are there. From a personal standpoint, it's trying to a very simple one is doing some breath work, right? So some type of breathing control which shifts your focus, right? So if like you were saying, right, if I am not trying to think of the purple elephant, or sorry, the orange
Yeah.
elephant, I need to shift my focus to that purple dinosaur, right? So if I'm able to have that target, as soon as I start shifting my focus to the purple dinosaur, I am not thinking about the orange elephant anymore, right? I hope I got my animals and my colors
Yeah,
right there.
no, it's
But the idea is when you're breathing, you're focusing in, right? You're narrowing your attention on one thing, which then it starts blocking out the rest of the stuff, right? And so we can gain some control and start thinking more rationally, as opposed to just letting that negative emotion spin out of control.
so if we were to go back to the very beginning of this show,
Yeah.
and we were running
Yeah.
into some technical issues, and it would have
Right.
been real easy for me to spin out of
Correct.
control, right?
Correct.
This thing's going wrong. But if I can
Yeah.
slow myself down or speed myself up, right, I could be in Mr. Mopey, and I could need
Right.
to kind of pump myself back up, but using
Yeah.
breathing as a technique to find that level of frequency, I guess is my best word
Yeah.
for it.
And the other thing that I think you did, right, if we can analyze in real time, right, or a little bit after the fact, is you focus on action, right? So what can I do? So, as opposed to just sitting there and being like, all right, I don't know what to do, right? You took action, right? So the more we can take actions and actionable steps, sometimes even in the wrong direction is helpful because it's getting us out of that place, right? So from a focal perspective and attention perspective is having cues, right? Verbal cues, physical cues, things that help us take purposeful action, right? So you can have do cues and be cues. You can have cues that help us remind us how we want to be, right? So I'm going to relax. Okay, that's how I want to be. I want to be relaxed. So that's my cue word. Or a do cue, right? Breathe, right? So that's reminding myself to breathe, right? So I have these watchwords or these cue words that in a moment of challenge, I can refer back to, and I know what I'm trying to do to get me to elicit those responses I'm looking for. And the other thing is sometimes it's actually different types of cues. Like let me just shift my attention. So we go back to the analogy of the purple dinosaur. Let me just shift my focus over there, distract myself for a moment, and bring my attention back, right? And so that would we would call it a grounding technique, right? Where you're trying to bring your attention back to the present moment. Is you can name 3 things you see in your environment, right? So I'm looking at myself on my screen, so I see my computer, I see my Diet Coke over here, and I see my glasses in the video, right? Those are 3 things in my environment. So my attention is now here in the present moment as opposed to in my own mind, right? So I've changed my focus from internal to external. And that
Okay.
gives me a little bit of space to start taking some control over what I'm thinking.
Okay, so if we could tie this into athletic performance, right? So here's an
Yeah,
opportunity in a very stressful time to practice some
yeah,
things which we could then bring back to the athletic performance arena
yeah.
and do it. So as a tennis player, what might be some things that could occur or ways that we could take these exercises to how we handle ourselves on a match court?
Yeah, so I think one thing is recognizing how we deal with adversity, right? So just by the very fact that we're going through COVID-19 and we're not able to participate in the tournaments we were supposed to play in, or not able to go to practice, how am I managing myself? What am I doing to get myself up every single day and maybe work out or do some other conditioning that I'm still able to do, or maybe watch game film or practice film, right, to work on my strategies and my tactics, so to speak, right?
So would you
So
say maintaining routine or changing routine? Um,
well, I mean, there's going to have to be do a little bit of both, right? You're trying to get some semblance of your old routine, but you're
mhm.
trying to you have to adapt because you know it's not like we can go out to the courts and
Yep.
practice, right, like you
Yep.
used to, right? So what can you do? I work a lot with military service members and in particular pilots, and they do chair flying, right, where they sit in the chair and imagine themselves flying the plane. Um,
Oh,
and they do that for multiple reasons. One of the biggest reasons is cost, right? Like just it's too expensive to go up and fly every single day. It's also dangerous, right? Like that's very fatiguing and taxing, and obviously just the inherent thing of flying is dangerous unto itself. So they get a lot of mental reps just imagining it, right? So you could do that in this time. Does that replace physical practice? By no means. Is it a decent substitute in this time where you can't get outside like you want to? The answer is yes. There's plenty of research that talks about creating a mental script and it'll start actually lighting up the same neural circuitry that you're using to play. Some of those same neural circuitries will be lit up when you're actually imagining yourself playing. So you can improve or work on strategies or technique just by picturing it.
okay, so what's the danger to someone who tends to run negative scripts? And so they find themselves sitting in a chair and
Yeah,
imagining, and all of a sudden, man, I missed that backhand again. Or
yeah,
something, I was up 5-3 and I choked away another set and I run that script over and over again. Does
yeah.
that have long term impact?
You're absolutely right. So we want to create the right imagery. So the three areas of imagery that you want to be mindful of is vividness, controllability, and perspective, right? So I want to have a nice vivid picture so it makes it more real, has a bigger impact on that neural circuitry. But what you just described is controllability, right? Can I control this image? So if I'm trying to picture myself winning or working on a forehand or a backhand, uh, then I want to make sure I'm doing it right. And if I'm not, I am actually creating a new neural pathway of the wrong way of doing it, right? So Michael Phelps very famously would do some imagery around his goggles getting either knocked off and getting water in his goggles, and he created an imagery script on how to deal with that. So even though the bad thing happened in his imagery script, he found purposeful ways to deal with it, and he practiced his strategy on what he would do if that bad thing happened, right? So that is more advanced level imagery. Early on, you want to picture yourself doing really well. Once you feel like you've mastered the skill itself from a physical perspective, so if you feel like you're really good at your backhand, then you want to maybe start adding, what do I do if I'm down, in a match? How do I bounce back? Right. So picture myself maybe losing, but then also picturing myself coming back and performing better. Right. So we can always fix that, but that's in a controlled environment, right? We're controlling that image and trying to make sure that we are ending with what we're trying to achieve.
So I'm an old guy, right?
Yeah.
Getting something else squeaking in the audio, but oh well, we're gonna rock through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an old guy, and I had a younger sister, just one sibling, and we lived in an age where summertime, you went outside after breakfast, you were told to come home maybe for lunch, and then after lunch, don't come home till dinner, right? Just go outside and play. And so there were a lot of times when maybe there wasn't anybody to play with, and you'd be playing basketball all by yourself, or maybe you didn't even have a basketball, and you'd be out and you'd be being guarded. At that point in time, it was probably like Bill Russell or something. For me, I grew up in Boston, so and Russell's guarding me, and I go and I take the fadeaway little jumper over him for the winning shot. Is that the type of imagery? I mean, because that was very real for me at the time.
Yes. Yeah. And
So that we do it naturally, right? That's the thing with imagery, is that we tend to think in pictures, right? Like, like what you described of those. Again, I'm keep going back to it, but it's a nice analogy of when you said purple dinosaur and orange elephant. My gut tells me is anybody that's listening to this, their version of that came up into their mind, right? They didn't just see the words orange elephant, right? They pictured an actual orange elephant, right, in their mind. And whatever that looks like, if it's Dumbo painted orange, if it's another elephant that they have in their head, right, and it's colored orange, right? So we naturally think in pictures. And kids, that's what they do, right? They mentally rehearse things all the time, right? And it is through play. Now, what we're trying to do is be more deliberate about it, right? And being more focused on specific areas that we want to get better. So it's that same thing, you against Bill Russell, but now you're working on your footwork, right? And you're imagining that. You're working on your fadeaway, right? And you're working on that technique of it. You're working on distancing, if you're taking him on, right? So then we're working on specific techniques, tactics, and also outcomes, right? How am I going to get the outcome I'm looking for? So that's taking what you did as a kid and just refining it, right? And so, what we do is, as a sports psychology consultant, is the term is performance enhancement. So you're already performing. We're just trying to make it just a little better, right? In some cases, a lot better, but in some cases, just a little better, right? So for somebody who has a lot of experience, it works as well too, right? So we can just tweak that imagery script to something a little more advanced and a little more, maybe it's real specific scenarios, maybe it's real specific opponents that we want to get ourselves mentally ready for. That's where we're going to use that imagery script. For a young kid, for a person just learning, they're going to use it a lot for skill development.
Do you advocate actually writing that script down that you want to be able to rehearse?
For sure. Yes. So it does a multitude of things, right? It helps create that vividness. So if I can get down on paper what I'm looking for in terms of, so you want to think of what am I doing physically, right? So sometimes for athletes, I'll actually have the athlete hold on, for a tennis player as an example, hold on to their racket. So they get the physical feel of the racket, right? And if they want to move in a small space as they're picturing themselves do it, they're going to go through those motions, right? But obviously they're not hitting a tennis ball, right? They're just going through it in their mind. But that physical sensation, so you want to think of all that. If you don't have the tennis racket, you can still picture, what does that feel like in my hand? How close are my fingers, right? Am I holding it? Sorry, I'm trying to get in the image, right? Am I holding it? Are my fingers touching? Are they not touching? What's my grip like? Trying to picture all those things. What kind of court am I playing on, right? What does it feel like under my feet? Am I playing on grass? Am I playing on clay, hard court? So you're trying to get all that physical and to include the environment, right? What is the environment like? Is it hot? We're in Texas, right? So summertime you're playing, it's super hot, right, on a hard court, for any court that matter in Texas. So you're picturing that, or you're picturing the beads of sweat coming off your brow, right? Trying to create as vivid as a picture as you can to include emotions, right? How am I feeling about this? Am I excited? Am I nervous? Am I pumped up? Am I sad, or whatever it is? Trying to elicit the emotions that we want. And when we write it out, we don't leave anything to chance. We're creating a nice, vivid picture that then becomes easier for us to control. And then that last piece of perspective, we can change. Am I watching myself from if I'm wearing a helmet cam or a GoPro, or am I watching it like while I'm watching myself on TV? And then I can shift between perspectives as I'm going through that imagery script. Yeah.
I think I heard you say earlier, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you can actually move your physiology toward that actual state as if you were in real competition, if you can
Yes.
very vividly imagine it.
Yeah, so it's not the same, right? But there is an impact neurologically, right? So what they've done is studies, and they did it with downhill skiers, right, where they had them, um, they had them hooked up, and they would, sensors to measure muscle movement, um, you know, sensors to measure brainwave activity, and they had them go down a run, right? For downhill skiing. Then they had them sit in a chair, and they had them imagine themselves going down through that same run, right? So they know where they're turning, where they're going different directions. And what they found was the sensors were picking up some of the same activity as though when they were actually physically doing it. So their brain was lighting up, their muscles were firing, obviously not to the same extent as you're actually going down a slope, but enough for the sensors to pick up those movements, right? So we know that this is not just us talking here. There's some research, some scientific evidence that tells us that how imagery works and the impact it has on us, right? So that's the performance side. If you think of if you think of people that go through PTSD, like those imagined events are so real that it causes them to take action in real life, right? Even though they're picturing something that happened in the past and they're reacting to it, those actually real, right? That is an example of how powerful imagery is, right? And it's eliciting the same nervous response. So that's one end of the spectrum. We're trying to take that same principle and apply it to performance, right? So we can create mental pictures to help us achieve our goals.
Right.
Yeah.
Robert, this is absolutely a fascinating subject. I think we could probably find a lot of little rabbit holes to go down. And, if you have time going forward, I would love to have you back on. And
I would love to be back.
Dig in a little bit more into the subject on and on. And I think that there's some really great information that could help some people both today and through practicing today in probably more stressful conditions, be able to bring those things to the competition arena in the future.
Yeah. So if I could leave a couple tips for everybody listening,
please,
right?
Please do.
Particularly in what we're going through right now, and this is true even just in competition, right? Is accept your emotions, right? Acknowledge that we are emotional beings, right, as humans. And if we don't acknowledge it, we just internalize it. And that when we internalize it, it's harder for us to control. So name your emotions so you can start taming your emotions, right? So if you're frustrated, if you're upset, if you're sad, particularly as we're going through the COVID-19 situation, is acknowledge that you're experiencing some emotion. Because once you say it, then you can come up with actions to deal with it, right? So I'm sad. Well, let me call a friend of mine that'll cheer me up, right? I'm frustrated. Let me go and do some push-ups, and that'll kind of relieve some of that, physical stress, right? So finding ways to manage that. So name your emotions to tame them, and acknowledge that they're there and they're real, right? And then the other thing is really this is a good opportunity to create some social connections, even though we're far apart and we're social distancing, right? So take advantage of the technology that we have. I think of the 1918 pandemic. They didn't have Facebook. They didn't have Zoom. They couldn't get on YouTube. So, finding ways to connect with people is going to help build some of that emotional resilience, right? You're not in this alone. You have people. And I think that'll help us get through this, but that'll also help us get through a lot of things that we'll face outside of this, and that to include sports.
Thank you. Those are great words for not just today, but for any time. I thank you much, and
thank you for having me.
And we will look to talk to you again very, very, very soon, because this doesn't look like it's going away, and the stress levels of people are just going up. We saw it in our own household today. All
right. Well, thanks very much. Have a great day. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Thanks. So that's Tennis 2020 for today. Real talk. And we are bringing you great information from Austin Tennis Academy and trying to share with you. We are trying to be the conduit for information, not the filter. Join us here again Monday. We think we know who Monday's guest is and Tuesday's guest, but I'm not going to announce it. So look for those announcements over the weekend. Be safe, be well, and continue to be amazing. We'll see you soon.